Hey, Em. Good morning. How are you doing today? So, just checking to make sure everything is looking okay, and it is. So, welcome to my live video cast. Um, Happy to be here, grateful to be here, thankful to be here, and thanks for spending time with me, Emily. Appreciate it. So, what is today? Today is the 4th of December. 2018, and time is moving quickly. Actually, you know what? Time pretty much, I think, moves about the same time every day or the same rate of change every day, right? So it's interesting how human beings' conception of time change shifts depending on, say, the condition of our brains and what we're doing and context and how deeply into flow we are. I don't know if you read that book by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, Flow, an amazing book. I'm kind of interested in what books you might be reading lately. I'm reading a couple books. Oh, I didn't bring. I got a new book at the library yesterday. Yes, I was at the library yet again. I got a new book about feedback, how to receive feedback, how to give feedback. And I'm looking forward to diving into it. You know, I'm kind of looking forward to diving into it this coming winter break. I'm going to have some time off from work. I'm going to have some time off from school. And so I'll be able to enjoy some quiet time reading and drinking coffee and enjoying the winter days. By the way, I did take my final exam in my machining class, MT109, last night. And believe it or not, I was the first one to complete the exam. And I'm certain that I got a 100% on the exam. I might have gotten one or two wrong. So I guess I could have gotten a 98. But it's either a 98, a 99, or 100. I'm pretty sure, I'm pretty confident. Although I'll tell you what, I have taken exams where I've been a little bit overconfident. You know, I saw an example of that in one of my partner students. He didn't study. In fact, he didn't come to class with a pencil. And I was like, oh man, I'm so glad that I'm a mature student where, you know, I don't take anything for granted, and I ensure that I do enough studying to do well on the exam. So glad about that. Gonna chalk up another A on my transcript, which is nice. Looking forward to my next class, which is welding. You know what? Let me tell you, I went to the library yesterday and I was just loving spending my time in the library. I only maybe had 30 minutes or less, maybe 20 minutes to spend in the library, but I'll tell you what, I could have easily spent an hour or two there. For me, there's something familiar about a library. There's something just beautiful about being in the library setting. It's so calm and relaxing, you know. I love the idea of people focused on reading and learning. You know, being in an environment where learning happens all the time. I was looking for books that I might be able to share with you in this forum or in this format. Books that we could go over together. I was thinking about books that might relate to philosophy or psychology. I like those subjects because they're really wide ranging. I have a sense that maybe you would be able to relate to psychological discussion or philosophical discussion a little bit more than, say, hardcore scientific discussion, which I'm more than happy to have. So anyway, One, when we left yesterday, I began to talk a little bit about my first job. And so I'll go ahead and talk some more about that. So let me give you a little description of what happened. What transpired. So yeah, I got my first job. I think I had my first job. I think I was a sophomore in college, and I was working over the summer. I didn't have to work during my high school years, and I didn't have to work during my first year of freshman college. By the way, in my opinion, I worked really hard during my first year of freshman college, and I thought I did really good. I learned a lot. I really buckled down and read those textbooks and took the exams. I was really happy about my performance my first year of college, and I think I was just as happy my second year of college too. I did really well. I was very studious, very responsible, and then that summer, I think I spent that summer of my sophomore year at home, and it was time for me to get a job. And so that summer, I worked at Lotta Burger, Blake's Lotta Burger, which is a restaurant chain. It's basically a hamburger chain in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And as I was mentioning before, I worked in various capacities. There was a period of time when I just pulled weeds. By the way, I want you to know that I worked in the distribution center, the central distribution center of that burger chain, that restaurant chain. There are a lot of burger restaurants all over New Mexico, and there is one central warehouse that sort of distributes food and supplies from Albuquerque to all those other stores. And so I was working at the main warehouse, and basically I was doing whatever that needed to be done. And sometimes what needed to be done was janitorial work. So I did a lot of sweeping and cleaning. I cleaned the toilets. Remember, this is my first job. I cleaned the toilets. I swept all around the grounds. I swept in the workshops. There were woodworking workshops in the area on the campus, so to speak, within the fence line. People were working with sheet metal and wood, creating things like cabinets and I don't know. They would create various things that all the restaurants needed for maintaining their buildings. And so, that woodworking shop, I would sweep up the sawdust, and there was a warehouse, and I would sweep up the warehouse and make sure that was clean. That warehouse stored a lot of things in it, like all kinds of things, like tools and equipment, and there was a forklift there, and they stored all kinds of supplies, any of the supplies that a food chain would use. And so not only did I did janitorial work, but I also was a person who worked the grounds. I pulled weeds around the front of the grounds near the highway and got that looking nice. Spent a lot of time under the sun. And then, of course, I worked in the warehouse. And that is shipping and receiving, where I helped unload semi-tractor trailers of various foodstuffs and materials like onions and tomatoes and whatever goes into a hamburger, buns. That's right. The restaurant had its buns shipped in with semi-trailers, and I would use pallet jacks to remove the giant cubes of wrapped buns stacked on pallets. and store them in the warehouse. And there were certain foods that were perishable, and they had to go into the freezer. And essentially, I'd work in the freezer. Transporting foods from one frozen area to another. So it was cold. Yeah, I can remember, like French fries, for example, right? Frozen French fries. They come off the semi trailer, and they are essentially in a freezer, which is the semi trailer. There's a freezer on board, and I would use a pallet jack, and with other people too. Other people would help me out, and we'd all just move the frozen potatoes from one freezer to another freezer. And then there was also just organizing, sorting stuff, making sure all the straws were in one place and all the sugar packets were in another place, and of course, like every worker, I had to click out. I had a time card, and I had to just click in the morning and click out in the evening or in the afternoon. And there was even a period of time when I drove a forklift, when I was forklifting oil. All the French fries are dipped in oil. They're fried in oil and French fry oil fryers, and the oil has to come from somewhere. So that oil came in these cubes made of, I guess, a coated cardboard, and there were stacks and stacks and stacks of these cubes of oil that the restaurants used every day. And so those needed to be transferred. They needed to be transferred from out of the semi trailers into the storage area, and then from the storage area to the loading dock, so that they could go onto the tractor trailers that were going to move all those foodstuffs to the restaurants. So, it was a pretty active area. There was always something to do. And let me tell you, I worked really hard in terms of physical labor. It was a pretty challenging job for me. I hadn't really been used to it. For example, my job was school. It was education. It was learning for pretty much most of my life. And so it was a really interesting experience, a good experience, really, for me to get out and do some physical labor. And of course I made mistakes. I made errors. I know one time I was driving a forklift filled with a pallet, had a pallet of the cardboard boxes, and all those cardboard boxes were stacked up. And I did I did lose a load. I did lose a load one time. Let me tell you, that was so rough. Because basically the stack fell over, right? The stack of oil boxes. And so I felt obligated to restack the oil, and it was very heavy. Anyway, I got it done and somehow survived that experience. Another thing I worked in that location was I worked in, I mentioned earlier that they formed their own hamburger patties using this hamburger patty forming machine. And so they got fresh ground beef in from a butcher somewhere, loads of it. You could imagine a burger chain all over the state of New Mexico and how much ground beef they go through every day. So they were always forming these burgers, and these burgers came in these bins, these blue bins. I remember them vividly. And they need to be washed, right? Because there's these meat juices that are at the bottom of the bins. And so it was up to me to, once the bins were used, they sort of were dirty and had to be cleaned afterwards. And so I spent a lot of time in my afternoons spray washing these bins, spraying them down, making sure that those meat juices were cleaned out of the bins. And then the bins, I guess, were shipped back to the butcher shops. And so I spent a lot of time. If you could imagine all the ground beef and all the bins in a burger joint, I sprayed out with hot water all these bins. And it's kind of interesting. The hot water that I sprayed the bins with would create these plumes of steam in the room. And I was doing this all in a meat locker, right? There were lots of meat lockers, which are essentially refrigerators. And so here I am spending a lot of time in a refrigerator with this steam sprayers. I had the big bay door open. And let me tell you, it was a really interesting environment where I would alternate between being too cold and being too hot. My vision was obscured by the steam. I'm so glad I didn't get hurt during my experience working in the fast food industry, because I know that the fast food industry is somewhat infamous for injuring its workers. And I thankfully walked away without any injuries. So very pleased with that. Mostly I was just doing janitorial work, cleaning toilets and cleaning like sewer grates and stuff like this. Not a sewer grate, but there were grates. If you could imagine, stuff falls on the floor and there are drains, and the drains need to be cleaned out. So, because otherwise, they get blocked. So anyway, that was one of my first jobs. In fact, I think it might have been my first job, my first real job. I've had other jobs before. I think I might just go ahead and describe what other kinds of jobs I've had. That might be of interest to you. Maybe I will move on to another subject right now, but I think I will talk about the jobs I've had over the period of me sort of talking. I think it might be useful to you to understand where I've come from and what kind of jobs I've had. All right. So I figured I'd go to Pinati's Extraordinary Origins of Everyday Things. And we've gone through a number of subjects already. We went through the origin of Christmas, the origin of Thanksgiving, the origin of shampoo, the origin of, lipstick, the origin of all sorts of cosmetics. And we might as well, since we're on this cosmetic theme, I figured we'd continue to do it. I figured nail polish. That was an interesting subject. I'm kind of interested in how nail polish originated and where it's come from. And I'm reading the subtitle, which says pre-3000 BC in China. So, all right, let's sit back, relax, and enjoy this passage about the origin of nail polish. The custom of staining fingernails, as well as fingers, with henna was common in Egypt by 3000 BC. But actual fingernail paint is believed to have originated in China, where the color of a person's nails indicated social rank. Okay. Hilarious stuff, if you ask me. But in a way, this is all about how we determine in-groups and out-groups. This is important about when it comes to questions about reproduction. And so human beings, we use certain markers, right, to determine what social group you're in. The color of people's eyes, the shape of their faces, the color of their skin. and apparently the color of their fingernails. Okay, so let's read on. The Chinese had by the 3rd millennium BC combined gum arabic, egg white, gelatin, and beeswax to formulate varnishes, enamels, and lacquers. Whoa! Amazing technology discovered and originated by Chinese. Thank you, thank you, thank you. According to a 15th century Ming manuscript, the royal colors for fingernails were, for centuries, black and red. Okay, colors for fingernails. Wow. This is amazing stuff that, if you held a certain position, that you'd color your fingernails black or red, or maybe black and red. Although at an earlier time during the Chu dynasty, a dynasty of 600 BC, gold and silver were the royal prerogative. Among the Egyptians too, nail color came to signify social order, with shades of red at the top. Queen Nefertiti, wife of the heretic king Akhenaton, painted her fingernails and toenails ruby red, and Cleopatra favored a deep rust red. Women of lower rank were permitted only pale hues, and no woman dared to flaunt the color worn by the queen or king. For Egyptian men, too, sported painted nails. Fascinating stuff. It's kind of interesting. Today, I hear and see men with painted nails, and it's a little edgy, right? It's a little counterculture, right? But the practice of men painting their fingernails existed back in Egyptian times. So there's a lot of historical precedent. This was particularly true of high-ranking warriors. Egyptian, Babylonian, and early Roman military military commanders spent hours before a battle having their hair lacquered and curled and their nails painted the same shade as their lips. Well, that's kind of interesting because I think my fingernails are essentially the same shade as my lips. Although actually not quite. I think my lips are a little darker red than my fingernails. Fascinating. Since ancient attention to fingernails and toenails suggests to cosmetics historians that manicuring was already an established art, the belief is supported by numerous artifacts. Excavations at royal tombs of at Ur in southern Babylonia yielded a manicure set containing numerous pieces in solid gold. The property of a doubtless well-groomed Babylonian nobleman who lived some 4,000 years ago. Well-manicured nails became a symbol of culture and civilization, a means of distinguishing the laboring commoner from the idle aristocrat. Wow. Okay, so learned a lot in that passage. Thank you very much, Panati. So what we learned was that the practice of painting fingernails has existed for thousands of years. 3000 BC, which is over 5,000 years ago. People were manicuring their toenails and their fingernails. They had manicure sets in Babylonia that were made of gold. Colors indicated social caste, and women in Egypt preferred red or rust, ruby-colored fingernails, and that the commoners had more pale nail polish colors. And men and women were doing this. There were Roman commanders who, before they went to battle, had their hair curled and had their fingernails painted and toenails painted. Amazing stuff. Really amazing stuff. And human culture is amazing in its variation, and it's interesting how things fall in and out of favor over time. I fully expect, today there's a lot of gender neutral talk, and there are shifts in our culture that are moving away from this bipolar expectation between men and women, and moving to this more of a unipolar type neutral gender trend, which I think is I think we're going to be in that for the long haul. To me, that's what the future looks like. It's a gender neutral future. I'm glad for it, and so I'm thinking that what there's going to be an exchange. I mean, there already is an exchange between the polar genders and stereotypical behaviors, and there's going to be an exchange, and I think this is going to be an amazing exchange where men and women are basically going to start swapping and sharing behaviors. They're already doing it, and that's going to be a source of exploration and growth and development, and it's going to be an unfolding of culture, and it's going to be awesome. A source of entertainment for sure, and I'm sort of looking forward to that gender neutral world, and I think things will be a lot better. That's my own personal opinion, of course. I'm glad to see the changes. We're all human beings, and we all learn from our environment. I believe that women learn to be women and men learn to be men. And, there are some subtle differences between the sexes genetically, but I think it doesn't make a big difference for the most part. I think of, for example, I look at animals, for example, and, I'm looking at a dog and I'm asking myself, well, what's the difference between a female dog and a male dog? Or maybe I'll look at a penguin, right? And I'll see, okay, is that a female penguin or a male penguin? And across species, unless you really know what you're looking at, you can't necessarily tell the male from the female. And I think that, it's just a natural, I think it's a natural thing that there isn't necessarily a big distinction between male and female. Now, there are small variations in behavior. I'm certainly during mating rituals and things like that, where it becomes apparent which are male and which are female. Though, it's kind of interesting how the genders got so separated over the last few millennia. How, it may have had to do with the agricultural revolution. So I'm guessing there was something about the agricultural revolution where duties were split, and they just got ingrained in us as in terms of human development. Now, I don't know this. I'm just guessing. I'm asking myself, what were the forces, the cultural forces that might have created this severe cultural dichotomy between men and women, and then hence sort of originated changes in behavior. They're so different. Anyway, I'm looking forward to a day when there's less difference among the two genders and we can live in more harmony and greater peace. I remember a time when it was very popular. This was during the 80s, when it was very popular to pit women against men in competitions, and that there was a big men versus woman sort of cultural meme that existed. And it was very apparent to me when I was growing up as sort of a preteen and a teenager. I was watching a lot of TV programs which were comparing and contrasting men and women. For example, there were tennis matches between, what was it, Navratilova and some other male tennis star that got a lot of press, and there were on television. Really, the television was rife with differences between men and women, and it just strikes me today as being somewhat artificial. There was even John Gray's really famous book, Men Are From Mars, Women Are from Venus, which sort of represents a lot of this sort of dichotomy between the genders, this sort of like pointing out and comparing the two genders and their behaviors. Anyway, I sort of see it today as an over focus on the differences and an under focus on the common features and the similarities between the genders. Yeah. So I think at least today what's happening is a lot more healthy than what happened during the 1980s and late 1970s. Okay. So let's move on to the next segment. Let's see, what question are we on? Oh, that was, I guess, question number 467. When and what was your first job? I think that was my first job. Question number 468. Why did you leave this job? Okay, so the reason I left the job at Blake Slaughterberg Group was because the summer vacation was over. And was I sad about having to go leave the job? No, I wasn't. I was really clamoring to get back into the library and get back to studying again. It was physically demanding labor, janitorial work. I was always using my arms and hands, and it was great from a lot of perspectives, but I did want to get back to to learning and cracking open textbooks and spending time in the library. I wanted to get back to my studies. My studies were physics. My major was physics at the time in college. And so I was focused on mathematics and physics and wanted to get back to the subject that I loved. So that's why I ended up leaving my first job. It was because of the summer semester was over, or summer vacation was over. Next question. Question number 469. Did you enjoy this job? Well, I enjoyed it for what I learned from it. Yeah, of course I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. I learned a lot about how the world works, so to speak, and how work works, how to work and what it involves. And it was a pretty good formative experience. Did I really enjoy the job? I would think that, at the time I was just a kid. I was just in my early 20s. Maybe I was 20 years old. Maybe I was 19 or 20. I just kind of did it. I tried to make the best of it. So in that way, I enjoyed it. Question number 740. Would you ever go back to this job? Okay. Well, of course, I'd be happy to go back to the job and do the job. I think that job is not really for me. But I would, if I had to do the job again, I would certainly have no problem doing it. I'd be fine doing it. It was kind of like an extra hand job where I was sort of an extra helping out over the summer, right? It was basically a summer job. And so, I did basically odds and ends kind of work. There wasn't necessarily a theme to the work other than getting done whatever needed to get done. I could definitely do it again. I have no problem doing janitorial work. I think it's honorable work and useful and helps a person become more effective and energetic. And so I'm fine with doing it again. I'd be happy to do it again. Next question. Question number 471. What is your earliest memory? So yes, I do have an earliest memory. I may have discussed this memory before, but my earliest memory is it's a vague understanding. It's being in a house. And this is a house, I believe, in Santa Rosa, New Mexico. See, when I was born in Espanola, New Mexico. At the time, my parents lived in Taos, New Mexico. Soon after I was born, my parents moved from Taos to Santa Rosa, New Mexico. And I must have been about 3, 4 years old. And we lived in a home in Santa Rosa. And I believe that I remember that home. I believe that I remember moving around in the rooms. And I have a general sense that that I'm familiar with this space. And there isn't any particular detail in the memory, but that is my earliest memory. In fact, my earliest memories are memories of when I lived in Santa Rosa, New Mexico. And in fact, I have quite vivid memories of when I lived in Santa Rosa. That was just my earliest memory. I think I lived in Santa Rosa, New Mexico as a young boy, and I mean a very young boy, 3, 4, maybe 5 years old. So I think I lived, I'm guessing, there for a span of 2 or 3 years in Santa Rosa. And the reason I say that is because I do have kindergarten memories in Albuquerque, New Mexico. So I do have very vivid memories of living in Santa Rosa as a boy. And interestingly, they all revolve around going to church. Because at the time, a very significant change at the church was that it was being built or remodeled. And it may have been being remodeled. It might have been remodeled. And I remember things like the chairs in the meeting room being, I remember what the chairs felt like. I remember what the room felt like. I remember when they had carpet installed. I remember when there was some construction going on inside the building. I remember standing outside the building next to a window with my brothers taking a photograph. I remember running around very vividly with friends. I grew up as a Jehovah's Witness, and this was a Jehovah's Witness congregation hall. And I have very vivid memories of that congregating hall in Santa Rosa. I also have other memories of me playing on playgrounds, and even one of me having a spaghetti dinner with friends. And now, of course, I was only like 4 years old, but these memories exist. They exist in my mind. So those are my earliest memories. Next question. Question number 472. How old do you think you were in this memory? Well, I have a pretty clear idea. My earliest memory, I mentioned, was about 3 or 4 years old, maybe 3.5 or 4. And the earliest memory, essentially what it is, it's sort of a memory of being in a room. And there are white walls, brown carpet, and then there's just this sense of familiarity as I move from one room to another through a hallway. So it's there's not anything specific. It is sort of a vague memory, but that is my earliest memory. And interestingly enough, I've actually tried to track down that home that we lived in, and I've spoken with my mom about it, and I haven't necessarily been able to track down that first home. So there was a question. Yeah, so how old do I think I was in this memory? I'm guessing about 3.5 to 4 years old. Next question. 473, did you ever get suspended in school? And no, I never did. Now, Did I ever get suspended? No, I never did. There was one time that I went to go see the counselor. Yeah, it was a bullying situation. When I was in grade school, I think it was it was fourth grade. So I was like 9 years old. And what happened is something happened. There was an altercation on the basketball court. So I love playing basketball. And this day, I guess I was, like I mentioned, in fourth grade. I was on the basketball court. I was playing with friends. And there was, there are aggressive students. They're aggressive kids who play aggressively. And so we were passing the basketball, and it was between plays. And I think his name was Francisco Cordova. I think that's what his name was. Anyway, he was kind of an aggressive boy. And we were tossing the basketball, and he tossed it extra forcefully at me. And I became upset, and he may have challenged me somehow, and I might have charged him, and he might have charged at me. And there might have been a tussle. Anyway, when we were split up, we both went to the counselor's office, and nothing happened. There were no consequences. And I'm not even sure that my parents got to know about it. Maybe they did. But I didn't hear much about it. But it did affect me. I was upset. I was angry. And I was afraid too. I was afraid of getting in trouble with the school, with the counselor. But it seemed to blow over pretty quickly. And we were back to playing basketball again. Maybe even as soon as the next day. But I remember being pretty upset about that as a kid. But it didn't have any lasting effect. That was also the most trouble I've ever gotten into in school ever. That's not too bad as a fourth grader. So I was sent to the counselor's office one time in fourth grade. And I was really the victim of an aggressive kid who, I don't know, was having a really bad day or something. And I just got wrapped up into it. But on a scale from 1 to 10, in terms of significance, I would call that a significance of 1 or 0 on my life, where 1 and 0 is the lowest on the scale. And it's a fairly low significance today for me. It's not something I really think about. But at the time, I remember I was pretty upset about it. I was probably a good 7 or 8 on the scale, upset about what had happened, and I was just bothered by it. I think I was angry and afraid. Those were the two emotions. But again, I just saw the counselor, and there were no real consequences other than going to the counselor's office and having a small chat with him. All right, next question. Question number 474. When was your first kiss? Okay. Well, I remember that quite distinctly. Yeah. So it was in college, and I think I was a freshman. And I had this girl I liked. Her name was Brandy Simon. And we kissed. Yeah. It was sweet. It didn't last too long, but it was sweet. And yeah, I still remember it. It was at the time I had a car, a white Fiat Pininfarina, and it was a beautiful, beautiful time. Yeah, I had a good time. Those are good times, man. First year of college was great. Next question. Question number 475. What was the first movie you saw in theaters? Boy, yeah, I remember seeing Jaws. I saw Jaws in a theater. And what other movies did I see in a theater? I think I don't know what my first movie I saw in a theater was. That is a very specific question. I don't think I can tell you. Maybe it was Bambi. I don't know. I can't remember. Maybe it was Snow White. It might have been a Disney movie. Very possibly. It's funny. It's yeah. All right. So what's the next question? Question number 476. How old were you when this movie took place? It is such a vague memory. I actually don't have memory of the first movie that I've seen in a movie theater. So I couldn't say. I don't know how old I was when I saw that movie. Question number 477. Do you have any nicknames? And yeah, I do. When I was in high school, I had a friend, still have a friend. His name was Michael Stem. And he gave me this nickname, Mig, which is, my name is Miguel. And he would call me Mig for short. And he was also an enthusiast about World War II history. And military history was his interest. And so he was reading about the MiG jet airplane. The MiG airplane is like a Russian airplane, or at least it was at the time. And it was popular. And for him, there was an association between that airplane, that jet airplane, the MiG, and my first name, Miguel. And so he would call me Mig. And then eventually it was adapted. There was stir added to the end. So my nickname became Migster for a while. A lot of people, I don't know where this meme came from. It was definitely a trend where people were adding STER to people's nicknames. And I'm guessing it might have come from a popular television show like Saturday Night Live or something like that. Migster, Enster, Streamster, as a way to soup up a word and make it a little more interesting. So yeah, I got caught up in that. And so do I have any other nicknames besides Migster? Good question. Well, I know that people say Miguelito to me quite often, which just means little Miguel. It's a Spanish diminutive. So sometimes I'm called Miguelito. Those are my only two nicknames. There was one other nickname that I sort of am hesitant to provide. But remember we were talking about that really aggressive, possibly bully guy, Francisco Cordova. When I was in 5th grade, maybe it was 5th grade, we were in the cafeteria and sitting across from one another at the table. And Francisco asked me if he could have my bun, right? At the time, we had trays of food, right, in the cafeteria. And there were spots for the main course, the side dish, the dessert, the milk, and the bun. We'd quite often get some bread with our meal, whether it was cornbread or a tortilla or a bun. These buns, these dinner rolls, essentially, these dinner rolls were made in the kitchen. I don't know to what extent they were made from scratch. My guess is that they were made from scratch. And basically, these meals were great. I really enjoyed them, and really enjoyed the meals that I got from my elementary school and middle school. But we were in elementary school, and Francisco asks me for a bun, and I say, yeah, you can have my bun. And then after that, he just calls me, oh, you're Bun Boy now. Or so here now my name is Bun Boy. And he used it in a very derogative way. This guy had a chip on his shoulder, that's for sure. So he's bugging me about this Bun Boy name. And so, believe it or not, that was a name that caught on. And so I had a nickname. Maybe it was for only like a week or two, but people would call me Bun Boy. I guess I was a little sensitive too. So that was actually, it was quite hurtful. I didn't care for that name at all. And it's kind of funny how even as an adult, I cringe a little bit when I talk about the story. It's kind of interesting. It's interesting how these wounds or hurts sort of persist over time. But it was the same guy, Francisco Cordova. I wonder what he's doing these days. I might have to check him out on Facebook. Hopefully his ways have been reformed over the last 30 years or so. All right, so those were my two nicknames, really. And they didn't get a lot of traction. People pretty much call me Miguel or Michael today. And those nicknames didn't last they didn't last a long time. Probably the one that has lasted the longest is the Mixter. I would guess if I hung around Mike Stem today, he might very well call me Mig. But I lost the Bun Boy moniker a long time ago. I think it only lasted for a week or two. Next question. Question number 478. Did you have an imaginary friend as a child? No, I never really had an imaginary friend. There was a time, though, I did have at least what I thought. This was when I was a young boy in high school. I thought I had some kind of supernatural presence being around. I called him Z. And that only lasted for about a week. And I was entertaining the idea, fanciful. There are people who are religious and have supernatural beliefs and believe that they have friends of all sorts, angels and spirit guides and even gods and archangels and things like that. I've never really been like that. I've never really had any kind of communication like that where I really believe. I mean, I was a true believer when I was a young Christian for a number of years. But beyond that, there was only one other instance when I thought I had some kind of imaginary friend, and that was Z. And that only lasted, I don't even think it lasted a week. It may have lasted less than that. Maybe it lasted a week. But I was, at the time, focusing on the spiritual world and this idea of spirits, and actually did come to believe that one existed and one was around me or supporting me. And I gave them the name Z. That is the letter Z. Why? I don't know. So anyway, of course, I don't believe any of that now. It was just a fancy that I had, and it's fascinating. Next question. Question number 479. Are you a good or bad influence to friends? Well, I think I'm an extremely good influence to friends. Not that I try necessarily to influence my friends, but I try to maintain as good and proper habits as I can, ones that help me live in the world as effectively as I can. Next question. Question number 480. Did you ever like the Spice Girls? Yeah, and I still like the Spice Girls. The Spice Girls rock. They have amazing songs. And I'm just so impressed by their body of work. And I kind of wish that they'd get back together again and release another album. It may be too late. It may be too late for them. But I liked all the Ginger Spice and Sporty Spice. I think I had a crush on Sporty Spice for a while. A lot of fun. So yeah, I love the Spice Girls. Spice Girls are great. I still like them. Next question. Question number 481. As a singer, what would your first album's name be? Well, I'm thinking that I like those crooners, the male tenors, and I would guess that if I had an album, it would be I would be singing romantic songs or songs about happiness and gratitude and peace. And so, it'd probably be a Christmas album or a romantic album, I think. Something, maybe the title would be something like Special Meaning or something like that. I don't know. Romance in the Evening, something like that, I guess would be. How about that? Next question. Question number 482. Did you ever own a treehouse? Okay, so yeah, I had plenty of tree houses. And one of the tree houses, and I grew up in Taos on a large piece of land, large to me, 7 acres. And yeah, on that land, there were plum trees, lots of plum trees. And in fact, that's where I made my tree houses. I would hang out in the plum trees and in and underneath the plum trees. The plum trees grew over these ditches, right? These waterways. And I had a lot of fun playing in those trees. Good times, man. Good times. I'll have to describe my tree houses to you for sometime in the future. Anyway, Em, I'm going to wrap this up. Thanks again for spending some time with me and taking time to connect and to understand and to learn and to grow and be part of my physical, emotional, and mental development. Thanks for being willing to sort of experiment with this new video system where I've got new sound, I've got new camera, and I'm trying to pull it all together. It's looking really good. I'm really impressed, so impressed about how things are coming together here with this video system. So here's to the future. I hope you have a fantastic day today. I hope you are going to have a fantastic week. I think I might have tomorrow off from work. So that'll be nice. I'll be able to get some errands done. And I'm also thinking very carefully about going to Disneyland later this weekend, maybe on Saturday. So wish me luck. I hope you have a wonderful day today. Can't wait to go to the work. Can't wait to go to work and go to the gym and do some working out. Hardcore working out. And I'll talk to you later, girl. I love you. Bye-bye.